You're looking very, very good.
Thank you.
Really good.
Thank
I'm really glad to see you again. It was a long time ago we did that little piece when you were at Ma 7, right? Or no, you were.
Maybe we were. I think I was gone from there, but
you were still into the hip hop.
Right. We were working movement for change.
We're going to want to talk about that and other matters, including some changes that have gone on in your life and current affairs. And welcome. And in the audience, welcome very, very much to conversation. 58-minute conversation with Conrad B. Tillard now, senior. He's a senior pastor at the Congregational, let me just get it straight, at the moment, the Nazarene Congregational Church, a United Church of Christ congregation in Bedford-Stuyvesant now, and he's had a very interesting background, and Conrad, welcome very much. So good to welcome you.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Share with us your own background, please. That's the way I do it here, weighed in, born and raised, and then we'll talk about that experience and some of the experiences you've been through, and then I know you want to talk considerably about current affairs, but share some of your own personal background, if you would, please.
Well, I was born in September of 1964 in St. Louis.
St. Louis?
Yes, and I grew up, I lived there till I was about 8 years old, and then my father moved to Washington, D.C., and my mother moved to Atlanta, Georgia. And so the rest of my life I grew up in both of those cities.
Was your father a man of the cloth?
No, actually my father was not. My father is a tailor.
Oh,
but
it shows.
My mother, however, married a Baptist preacher.
I see.
And so my family on my mother's side was a very devout AME family, African Methodist Episcopal Church, and on my father's side, 5 generations Presbyterian.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And so a couple of years after divorcing my father, my mother married a civil rights Baptist preacher. And so I grew up there from that point on.
How
in the
old were
Baptist
you
Church.
when that happened?
About 8 or 9 years
very
old.
impressive time.
My mother has been remarried about 40 years now to my stepfather.
Oh, congratulations to them both.
Yeah.
Long time, run-of-the-mill, run-of-the-play show.
Yeah. So I had an opportunity to grow up in the bastion of the sort of civil rights movement. From the precincts of Dr. King and the civil rights movement there in Atlanta and in D.C. in the shadow of Howard University and all of the great luminaries that came to formation in the nation's capital.
Right, you are. Yeah, you were. There was a whole lot going on when you were very young. Civil Rights Voting Act.
Grew up, born in the mid-'60s, grew up.
Freedom Riders and all that early
Freedom Riders
stuff.
were before my time.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, that's the legacy of yours.
On,
right.
I was very, very much aware of the black civil rights movement in the late '60s and then the black consciousness movement of the early '70s to mid-'70s.
Right. And so that's informed your life, that sort of thing. And you were, the church was important to you as you were growing up?
I would suspect that it was as important to me as it was for most young black boys. It was something that was a part of my life. Joe Frazier and Muhammad Ali were much more important. But I had to go to church.
Yeah.
And certainly my family was rooted in the church. So while it was important, it's like most things you grow up with. It's a constant. It's there. You take it for granted. And it doesn't really have the kind of meaning that it will have in your life later, but it was there, and it was formative in my life, and I can't imagine having grown up without the dictates and edicts of my grandfather on my father's side, my paternal grandfather, my maternal grandmother, and my aunts and mother and stepfather. My stepfather, however, was very instrumental in my life because he was a Baptist minister, but he was more focused on social justice and the civil rights aspect of ministry.
Wonderful. That's a very important part of the ministry, it would seem to me, particularly in an age where there was such flagrant injustice all over.
In fact, I'm writing the memoirs of the first part of my life, And one of the things my publisher doesn't want me to talk about too much.
Okay.
But one of the things,
a little hint.
One of the things that I talk
yeah.
about in my book, In My Father's House, going to be published by Atria Books, which is an imprint of Simon and Schuster.
Oh yeah.
Is that I grew up in a home where people like Reverend Jesse Jackson and people like Ralph Abernathy, Hosea Williams, when I was a boy, used to show me the scars that he got on his shins from the Edmund Pettus Bridge. So I was always around the struggle, always around the Civil Rights Movement, and always around the Black consciousness movement.
Yeah, well, that would, and that family setting is probably as important as anything else, including even the educational context in which you're brought up. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and it was one of a great deal of challenge in that. Then you did go through school and university and so forth. And
That's right.
Which way did you see yourself going? Did you see yourself going toward a ministry or concern with that early, or what?
I did. My first interaction with what we call to the ministry came in 1984, and it was
you were 20 then,
right? During Reverend Jesse Jackson's campaign.
Right.
I became involved in that campaign. I was a state coordinator in Pennsylvania and worked nationally in the headquarters that summer. And I felt called to the ministry.
So did I. He was an orator that was really out there, and really putting a very impactful kind of speech he could give and talk and everything.
Not only
and
on
paving
me, but a whole generation.
Right, and paving the way for maybe Mr. Obama to come down the line, but he was really an orator for a first order. Yeah.
No question about that.
And you worked in his campaign
I did.
as a young man, right?
I did. And ironically, it was in that campaign, which you remember, the theme was the Rainbow Coalition.
That's
right.
right.
Heavy theme in that campaign.
Push, they had a thing, Push.
Well,
was there
Push
something
was
up in
Reverend
Chicago?
Jackson's organization.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
That was his organizational base before he ran for president. But actually, that was a pivotal year for me because I really became disgusted with politics, electoral politics.
As usual.
The treatment of Reverend Jackson and being a naive 19, 20-year-old who really believed in that day, many of us believed that Reverend Jackson could become president. We believed that back in '84. And seeing the machinations of the Democratic Party and the punditry at that time, I became, I would say, very disillusioned. And there were two main voices at that time in America. One was Minister Louis Farrakhan, along with Reverend Jackson. And when I became disillusioned by the way Reverend Jackson was treated, there was nowhere to turn but to that other voice, because I felt that if you had a philosophy that said that you were open to people of every race, every creed, every color, the Rainbow Coalition, and you sought to build that, but the political establishment obviously was so cynical that it did not want to see working class people, poor people, people of every social economic level come together around our commonality.
Well, they might have had the attitude, it's a good idea, but it will not get us the win in the election, so we can't go that way. It's too soon, that kind of thing. Wait a 1,000 years or something. Yeah, okay, that's different. Yeah,
that to exploit the racial divisions, keep poor whites and poor blacks and poor Latinos and poor Asians at odds with each other.
Yeah, and they know how to do that.
It's
funny how people can vote against their own interests, right? They can be led around by PR, and it's really a little bit disturbing.
We see that now with the healthcare debate, because you have poor people or people driving trucks, people unemployed living in trailer parks every day, listening to Rush Limbaugh and mouthing his line against what the President of the United States is trying to do for all people.
May well be isn't enough coming out of the Republican establishment that can be listened to in any kind of making sense, too. They're sort of in disarray now, given the current situation. Well, they resort to Limbaugh.
Or maybe they're crazy like a fox, so we have to be very careful.
Keep your eye on all that, But you were there in '84 getting interested in politics and so forth, disillusioned by the electoral process with Mr. Jackson not being able to.
Well, I didn't understand it enough.
Where did you lay the blame? Where did you lay the blame for the lack of the vision of the political or even the intellectual leadership to lead this country toward where it's gone since 1984, for instance? A great deal of change.
I would have to say the political establishment, and when I say that, I mean the professional politicos, the parties, the pundits who have a vested interest, the professional, perpetual Washington establishment. I think they have an interest in keeping the status quo, and I think a candidate like Reverend Jackson in '84, like President Obama in 2009, threatens the status quo because you've got the elites, the political elites, you've got the economic elites who have a vested interest in keeping the status quo.
Seems to me, if I cast back over history, you go back to the Roman Empire, you had emperors. Most of the people were slaves, essentially, serfs. In the feudal period, we had the crowned heads, the aristos, and everybody's wallowing around in the mud. Poverty and so forth. And it's always been like that. There's always been a few people who have the leading voice in terms of the establishment, and that they have a responsibility to, usually we're referred to historical documents and so forth, that they represent responsibility, and people who want to make a change are very hard put to bring qualitative or major change. Like the race issue was a major thing that had to be addressed and so forth. It's difficult to bring change to a society where people are used to living with the established order. Yeah.
No, there's no question about that. And indeed, I saw that as a student, and I saw where someone like Reverend Jackson, who had a really, really broad appeal.
Yes.
And
Oh,
saw
yeah.
that later
Absolutely.
In 88, he would go to Vermont and go into New Hampshire, and he found common ground and commonality with all these different people. But again, the overwhelming majority of people could not understand what this appeal was about. So that led me to actually begin to reassess the American situation.
I think a lot of us were and have been and still are doing that, or trying to do that.
I reassessed
in a comprehensive way, perhaps.
Yes, I did. And my conclusion at the time was, and as I look back on it, it was a very logical conclusion, that if we can't get together and be a rainbow coalition, and that if African Americans are essentially on their own, then we should separate. And at that time, Minister Farrakhan's voice was very appealing to me, and I actually left the church of my youth.
Did you
and joined the Nation of Islam?
Could I ask you, did you ever team up with or get linked up with Stokely Carmichael?
I knew him very well.
I knew him quite well too. I loved him.
In fact, I first met him as a student, and when I left the Nation, he was also a very, very important advisor in terms of the direction that I developed, and this was years later.
Advocating Black Power.
Well, advocating Black Power, no question, but more so, he was very helpful to me in terms of understanding how this is really profound. You know, he's Kwame Ture.
Yeah, right.
Which is
Beautiful.
The name he took. Started out in SNCC. And then he was in the Black Panther Party. And then he ended up in the All African People's Revolutionary Party.
Yeah, he moved to Guinea. He
told me when I was about to leave the Nation, I was contemplating this years later.
Yeah, we want to get a little bit of that Nation before you leave it.
Okay.
Okay.
Right. Well, let me just say this. He told me at the time, he said, I was really
what year is this now? You said 84. Now
we're jumping up to now 1997.
97. So you're now an older man. You're now 30 odd or something.
Right, early 30s. And I'm contemplating leaving the Nation. And he reminded me that he had started in SNCC and then went through the Panthers and then ended up in the All African People's Revolutionary Party. He said the people won't really care about where you are if you decide that your consciousness has moved to another level. He said as long as you remain committed and consistent on the issues. And I think that that was very eye-opening to me.
Yeah, it's good general advice, no?
It was very,
for a life.
It was very good advice. It was very good advice.
Yeah.
Because you don't wherever you are, you want to be based on your conviction. You don't want to be in any particular place because you feel moving or evolving is a betrayal of where you are. When you're in a place, you want to be there because you firmly believe and you're committed to the ideas of that organization, that movement, or in terms of your life's development.
Life's all too short. You might as well lead it in a way where you're committed to something really ethically sound and based upon big principles that you can agree with yourself and others, and that's something important. Back to the education. When you were there, you were studying. You got involved with Jesse Jackson's campaign. You were young. Where did you go to school? What did you go? Did you study divinity studies then, or were you studying? What were you doing, and where was your head and everything?
I have a BA from the University of Pennsylvania, and I studied African American studies there, as well as history and political science. Of course,
that's a good grounding.
That was very good grounding because not only did I get a chance to study the history of African American people in this country, people like Frederick Douglass and David Walker, Bishop Henry McNeil Turner, Bishop Richard Allen. But I also got a chance to study people like Thurgood Marshall and Du Bois and Booker T. Washington, and so I have a very good grounding in the onward march toward empowerment of African American people that has ultimately brought us to President Barack Obama. It didn't just start with him. There's a long history, and so that was very helpful to me.
And that was a long, tough ride. I mean, the road that was trod by many people, and it was a hard grind that was going on against implacable prejudice and all kinds of. James Joyce has Daedalus say, history is a nightmare from which I'm attempting to awaken.
Well, I think,
and there was a lot of nightmare scenarios going on in this country and other places around the world, for that matter, on the issue of race.
I think James Weldon Johnson said it best.
How's
he
that?
Said, stony the road we trod, bitter the chastening rod, felt in the days when hope unborn had died, but yet with a steady beat have not our weary feet come to the place for which our fathers sighed. And that's, of course, the
That's
Negro
beautiful.
Anthem.
Is that the Negro National?
Yes.
You going to send me a link to that, please? I would love to do that. I want to put that on my... That's from the Lift Out Every Voice. Now, where did that come from?
Lift Every Voice.
Yeah, but who
James
penned?
Weldon Johnson.
Who's James Weldon Johnson?
Johnson was one of the seminal figures in the Harlem Renaissance. Just
in the 20s or
30s? Great writer and thinker, artist, composer. And one of his, that to me is his greatest
That's
legacy.
Beautiful. You're going to, or I'll find it. I can find it on Google now with that wonder. Langston Hughes time, right? Yeah, okay. That was really good. But you studied that. When did you get an inkling that you wanted to go academically? And you must have taken note that many of the people who were leading the march towards civil rights and the transformation that was coming were of the cloth, right?
Right.
You must have picked that up either subconsciously or otherwise. And so when did you get the idea that you wanted to move toward the life of the ministry?
Well, I was in the ministry.
You were in a ministry then?
Well, when I joined the nation, eventually I
You weren't involved in the Baptist church or something prior to that? Or you weren't involved as a church leader or something? Or you know what I'm saying? You were watching heavyweight boxing matches?
and going
as we all were,
going to church every Sunday. Because in my house, if you didn't go to church, you couldn't go anywhere else.
I see, okay.
But my point was, Reverend Jackson really inspired me. To sort of begin to understand my call to ministry. And it was eventually when I joined the nation, it was there that my call to ministry first was acted out, and I was for many years a youth minister in the nation, and then I eventually was sent here to New York from Philadelphia to become the minister of Mosque Number 7.
And where is that now? We've had an argument in the control room. Is that 117 or 127?
Well, the new site is 127th Street.
But it used to be 117.
It's 116th Street.
16. That's right, 16. Right. And was that Malcolm? That was Malcolm.
Right. And I found great satisfaction in because I'd studied Malcolm in school to actually become have the same position Malcolm had.
Giant.
And Malcolm
giant.
was
Intellectual
tremendously
giant. Yeah.
influential in my development.
I would have thought so, yeah. And it was Reverend Jesse Jackson,
right?
Reverend Abernathy, Reverend Martin Luther King. That must have had some influence for you, drawing upon those Sunday school and church things that your mother had encouraged you toward, and so forth, and moving you toward your calling, perhaps. Keeping your eye on civil rights and justice in a general sense, but moving toward the ministry.
Right. In fact, my call to ministry was always inspired
That is civil rights.
Through the lens of social justice.
I would have thought, yeah.
Because you see, my stepfather was in the movement, and so again, movement figures coming.
It was in
out
the
of my
in
house.
too. It was in the air.
In the time I grew up, it was in the air.
Yeah.
And so one of the things you didn't want to be in terms of my rearing was a preacher of any faith or any denomination that merely talked about a pie in the sky and didn't have a social gospel. So I could never see any ministry outside of the lens of the social gospel.
Of the social gospel. We want to talk about that because you are a man in the crowd, what that means and everything. That's really interesting. That the allure, if that's the right thing, or what it is about the nation, when you made the transformation to become part of the nation, that must have been a large change, or was it?
Well, it was a big change. It was
and
a big
what
change.
prompted you to move that way, do you think? Was it a sense of disappointment in terms of the established order,
well, it was partly
not radical enough, or what?
I don't know that I was looking for anything to be radical. I was just looking for fair treatment. I was looking for justice. I was looking for people to value black life, black thought, black people as I felt it should be. And I felt that at the time when Reverend Jackson was so badly treated by the Democratic establishment, I just felt that at that point in my life, for a moment, I really believed that the idea of racial reconciliation, of working with people from different races, was an improbable idea in America.
Yeah, they would call it not practical, and
I thought it was
the Southern strategy was worked by the political players and played on that and everything.
Of course, this was the
and it had been going on for a long time.
And this was the Reagan era. So
oh boy,
you know, when you're a young African American, 19, 20 years old, you're looking at Reagan in the White House. You're looking at a Republican-controlled Congress. You're looking at the direction of America that was very hostile to African Americans. And mind you, you're looking at a Democratic Party who was not faithful to the ideas
of the social gospel,
but trying to figure out how to out-Republican the Republicans.
Right.
Of course,
in order to get elected.
A few years later, you got the DLC. Democratic Leadership Council.
Right.
So that was the era. So I always remind people, I was made in America. I grew up in church and Sunday school, and when I joined the nation, I believe it was because as a young African American, I felt that this country was not just to my people.
No doubt. There was no doubt of that.
So that's very important.
Yeah, and you were influenced strongly by Malcolm, in memory of Malcolm,
X.
and an example of Malcolm and so forth, and Final Call.
All of that.
Still, you get good news.
It's good newspaper.
Yeah, and it was there. And then you were here, and then you got known as the hip hop minister. You were very into popular music, youth, the popular music. I think you took some exception to some of the lyrics and sentiments of some of the hip hop and rap and so forth.
Right. Well, of course, being a minister in Harlem in the 80s and 90s.
That's a challenge,
brother. Intersection with hip-hop, the crack era. And then when I left the nation in 1998, I was trying to sort of determine what direction my ministry would go in. And one of the things I always admired about people like Huey P. Newton and Bobby Seale, for example, and Martin Luther King and Malcolm, for example, is that they looked at the realities of the society in which they lived, the time in which they lived, the circumstances.
Right.
And they came up with a message that was relevant to
that time.
Right. And so, since the overwhelming majority of young people in this country, black, brown, red, yellow, white, doesn't matter whether they're from the city, suburb, urban, rural, were influenced by hip-hop culture.
All over the world.
All over the world.
It's everywhere.
Everywhere.
Yeah.
So
it was a major thing.
We came up with the concept of a movement for change.
Right.
That we would
CHH.
CHH.
How come you got double H?
Well, the acronym was for Conscious Hip-Hop Activism.
Oh.
Necessary for Global Empowerment.
Oh, very good. Very good.
What we did, Brother Chandler, we said that the hip-hop community had never been looked at as a political demographic.
Right.
It was looked at as an economic demographic.
Right.
Teenagers
sell things.
Were looked at as an economic demographic by the record companies. But no one ever looked at the hip hop generation as a political demographic.
Right.
And so we said
that's youth too, because it wasn't just people of color or something. It was influencing youth all over the world.
We're talking about youth.
It still is,
across the board.
And there's a amalgam going on in the music and so forth. Still, there's a legacy of that.
Well, what our focus wasn't so much the music, because there were so many people focused on that. We said that if Chuck D and Public Enemy could sell 1 million records, then Chuck D should be able to inspire 1 million people to vote. We said that if, at the time, if Fat Joe could sell 1 million records in the Bronx, he could be elected city council in New York, because you only need 5,000 to 7,000 votes
to
be a city council person.
There was somebody Fat Joe? Was there somebody Skinny Sam? Or, no?
But let me say, people laughed at that.
Yeah.
But
it's true.
I recognize that Jesse Ventura went from the Worldwide Wrestling Federation to the governor's mansion in Minnesota.
Yes, sir.
And so what we said was that in 5 to 10 years, this is back in 1997, 98.
Okay.
We said in 5 to 10 years, the hip-hop generation, hands that once scratched turntables, should be able to pick presidents.
It may be that you were right on.
We were
because I can do the math on that.
We were absolutely
98 to 2008 is 10 years.
10 years.
Yeah.
And in 1998, Barack Obama was at Harvard.
Yes.
Barack Obama was on the south side of Chicago.
Yeah.
But we understood that as the baby boomers were extremely influential in the latter part of the 20th century in America, we knew, we counted on the fact that the hip-hop generation was going to be enormously influential in terms of determining the political and social direction of this country.
The spirit of the zeitgeist, in a certain sense.
We already see it.
Yeah.
We saw it culturally.
Yeah.
It's not a stretch to see how the hip-hop generation has changed America culturally. But nobody saw the ability of the hip-hop generation to change America politically and
intellectually.
We saw that.
And opening upon a new consciousness.
A new consciousness.
I mean, that makes new things possible. Because the youth is always in the advance of being idealistically concerned with, advancement and change. They can handle it better than the older you are, the more difficult it is to adapt to new. Right.
And while other people
and that, if I may, Conrad, that's not just America, or that's not just East Coast. That's the world.
It's the world.
And the world, they had an incredibly articulate candidate emerge in the person of Barack Obama, incredible orator and so forth. And he is popular, particularly among the youth, not only in the United States of America, but also the whole wide world.
Well, I think the problem is that so many people are constantly, they say generals are always fighting the previous war.
It's true, I think.
And I think so many people of political consciousness, and this is particularly true of the left, are always looking for young people to do what was done in the past.
Yes, to make the same mistakes.
To make the same mistakes, to wear the same clothes, to have the same slogans, to do the same things. And what we saw was that there was going to be an opportunity, because hip-hop and youth culture today has broken down a lot of the racial barriers and racial hang-ups that a lot of people still in the earlier generations still hold on to.
They still hold on to. Mr. Carter told us that the other day. Some of this
did.
nonsense coming out of the far right-wing pastures is of that nature because it's very deep-rooted in a lot of people's stupid consciousness.
Right, but we saw that young people didn't have that consciousness.
Yeah.
And 10 years later, Barack Obama was elected president because of the fulfillment of the idea that we had with the movement for change back in 1998, and that was register young people to vote. Young people not only work on Senate staffs or work on campaigns, but become the candidates themselves. And we've seen this with Cory Booker in Newark. We've seen this with
mayor there?
Yes, he is.
Yeah, right. Very popular.
We've seen this with other candidates all over the country.
Harold Washington.
But people laughed at us. You know, people laughed at us in '98 when we said that people who were rappers, people who were community activists, could become the candidates of the new day. So we feel a movement for change was a tremendous idea, and it has borne tremendous fruit in the election of Barack Obama as president. So.
Did you see it coming in 1990?
Absolutely.
Did you see Barack Obama coming? Did you see a black president becoming president of the United States in 1998 and put that down? When did you first meet Mr. Obama, or when did you become aware of him as somebody on the horizon that's going to emerge the way he has?
Well,
I wonder. And we don't want to lose track of your education,
right.
And you're getting up to Harvard Divinity,
okay.
And a change with Mr. Thurman?
Howard Thurman. Right.
Howard Thurman.
Sure.
We want to talk about that. We don't lose track of that. But okay go ahead.
Well, let me say that I can't say that I saw a black president. I have to be very honest with you.
You would have had to have been prescient.
We were hoping for black Congress.
Yes, right.
Black Senate representation.
Yeah.
But I first became aware of President Obama from Reverend Jackson, being with him when he was in the state Senate.
Okay.
And he was running for U.S. Senate.
Okay.
And of course, Reverend Jackson has always been very progressive, and he said that we should look out for Barack Obama. And
what year would that have been, do you think?
that was about 2002.
2000, that's early, That's early, Because he was doing community organizing then? Yeah, right.
He was in the Illinois State Senate.
But he knew him then.
He knew him.
Conrad,
no.
Cornel West picked up on him, I think, and some others picked up on their radar screens, this young fellow out in Illinois.
Well,
like
Reverend
Lincoln
Jackson is based in Illinois. So
that's true. Right.
Nothing
that's
goes
right.
on in the south side of Chicago that he's not aware of. So,
I suppose so.
So that's when I first heard of him.
Right.
I didn't meet him until met him here in New York before the campaign. At a meeting with clergy, but I felt that we were in a historical anomalous time. I thought because of the lack of Bush's
we had 8
Bush
years
was so
in the
unpopular.
wilderness. Yeah, Bush was. It was just like a rend in the society.
Brand was destroyed.
It has been. They're going to have a hard time picking it up.
The Clintons had offended so many that I felt that we were in a historically anomalous period.
They'd offended so many
he
that
could walk right in.
Right.
I believe.
Well, he did. He did. He came up against that Clinton machine, and that was really something. That would have been like the walls of Jericho or something, and he was able to do it. And it probably would have been predicted there was no chance by all the pundits who were looking in that rear view mirror that they all like to look into. Let's just break for a minute and go back to Harvard Divinity.
Okay.
That's when you went up there, and you were as you went there. Were you in the nation?
I was leaving.
You had not left.
I was, for all intents and purposes, no longer in the nation. Ironically,
why?
Why?
Yeah, maybe why? Why did you feel to leave the nation? Was it going home? You got the book you're coming up with is Prodigal Son.
Right.
So the Prodigal Son is the one what comes home.
The Prodigal Son it will give you a clue of
but you
what
learned
that
a lot.
process was.
You learned a lot in the nation.
I learned a lot.
And you kept track. You've kept track with Jesse Jackson and the people that you've been in touch with there.
Sure.
At the same time, you were in communication with Reverend Butts. at Abyssinia?
Well, let me say that
we only got an hour, see?
Okay, well,
and your life's too darned interesting. We could talk for 15 hours easy.
Well, let me say, I went up to Harvard Divinity School.
Yeah. What year?
1997.
So you're how old about?
I'm 45 years old.
45, and you're in a period of transition.
Right. Well,
from the nation. You've already been
in my early 30s.
Yeah.
45 now.
Yeah.
I went up to Harvard Divinity School because I wanted to take a break for a moment and just really begin to reevaluate life. Dr. Evelyn Higginbotham, who had been my academic mentor at Penn, was a professor at the Divinity School, and she encouraged me to come up.
And you wanted a kind of break, right?
And I needed a break.
Now, I didn't get it straight. You're still in Ma 7?
No,
you're not in.
At this
you
point,
made the break.
At this point,
Was that difficult?
It was,
if I may?
It was difficult.
Because there's a great deal to be said for the nation.
It was a difficult decision, but it was a decision I felt compelled to make.
I read in your bio that it's a very good site, and we'll give it up at the end. People will follow you, your life story and so forth, that you were very greatly inspired by a man named Mr. Thurman.
Right.
A divinity teacher at Harvard.
No. Actually,
Howard
Thurman is, of course, deceased.
Okay.
He was a great theologian, and I encountered him at Harvard Divinity School. I knew of Howard Thurman growing up in Atlanta and Washington, D.C.
Right.
Howard Thurman's name is everywhere at Howard University.
I want to pick up.
As well as Morehouse College.
Really? Okay.
But I didn't understand the profundity of Howard Thurman until I took a number of classes on him at Harvard Divinity School.
You were right there in the classroom with the man.
It was in that period of my life.
Like an epiphany or something.
It was a great epiphany.
Yeah.
I was open. I was searching.
Yeah.
And the broadness of Thurman's theology, his friendships with Gandhi, his very ecumenical and interfaith view.
Ecumenical. Yeah.
Ecumenical.
Very timely. Yeah.
And so it opened me up. And people, when they read the book, they will see in greater detail how Thurman played a great role in my life. And
the book forthcoming.
Book is forthcoming.
Okay, yeah.
But from that study, although I didn't intend for it to happen, I had a very powerful conversion experience.
Really? All at one time? A road to Damascus
not all
thing?
At one time.
Over a period of time.
Again, they read the book, they will see the complexities that led to that.
Right.
But essentially, in the same time period, I had this enormous and tremendous conversion experience, which actually brought me back to
Jesus,
the place that I had grown up, Jesus Christ, the Church of Christ, understanding God through a relationship with Jesus Christ.
When you were going toward the nation, you said earlier that it was the social gospel, which I translated in my way of thinking is that it had some social concern for the social order rather than just how many angels can dance on the head of a kin theological argument or something. And that could be translated into a certain degree of militancy against the system, which was elementary unjust.
Has a social gospel.
Yes, I know exactly. That's what I'm saying.
So that's very consistent.
I know, but what I'm trying to get at is that translated out into real a militantly take a chance to walk over the bridge with the dogs and take the chance and make a commitment against injustice. And was there that in the teachings of Professor Thurman that had a strong relatingness to the questions of elemental justice or the social gospel, as you put it? Or where do those two things stand? And was the Nation of Islam and its militancy against the system that was so obviously out of date with what the zeitgeist required, that you could find it within Christianity or within the Christian order?
Let's put it this way. Thurman is Dr. Martin Luther King and Reverend Jesse Jackson's mentor.
Right, okay.
And so people forget that there is a subversive side to Christianity.
Thank you.
And unfortunately, with the Emperor Constantine, Christianity became the religion of the state.
About 300.
But before that, of course, Jesus and his followers were really people who challenged the existing social order.
It was the Roman
order.
Roman
Empire.
Yeah, right.
And so I think in my life there's a consistency in that I want to always be for those who are locked out, who are left out, who are at the bottom, who are the least, because I believe that Jesus is a God of the oppressed. I believe that God is a God of the oppressed. And so my focus will always be fighting for those, standing up for those who are locked out.
Yeah.
I think now, as I have re-examined my theology, I believe more, and I embrace the principle of reconciliation as a superior alternative
to throw out the money changers.
Well, not so much throughout the money changers, but racial politics, the division of races,
moving toward ecumenicism.
Certainly ecumenism,
ecologically,
and also reconciliation of human beings,
and
because ultimately,
the larger universe around the ecology and the whole of the larger context, the reconciliation in terms of some new something that is being afforded the process here that perhaps is not so characteristic of history. Do you like the line, "History is a nightmare from which I'm attempting to awaken"?
I think it has great relevance.
That's James Joyce.
Yeah, I think it's a profound point,
because it is, in a very real sense, compared to where we might be at a moment of qualitative transformation in the affairs that this period makes available to us that would have been hard for our forefathers to see the possibility of in the historical context. It didn't present the opportunities, the technology, the capability, communications, and all these sort of things that are characteristic of our time. Do you understand what I mean? We ought to be maybe sensitive to the fact that they were limited by the historical context to what could be done in the social gospel or in the justice movement. And it seems to me one of the first charges of the Gospels is take care of the least among ye. It seems to be a principle there. Do you find the same in Islam? Do you find the same thing in Judaism?
I think
tremendous commitment to justice in Judaism and that.
In all the Abrahamic faiths, there is a commitment to justice.
Okay.
And that's why one of the things that was very important to me when I returned to the church is that I would never engage in any internascent warfare against any branch of the Abrahamic faiths. I would always be about interfaith dialogue. I would always be about the appreciation of the legitimacy of other theologies. I have embraced once again and come home to the theology of Christ, a Christocentric view of the world, but that's not mutually exclusive, and I don't begrudge any of my Jewish brothers, any of my Muslim brothers. But I am squarely rooted, standing on the gospel of Christ, the social gospel, and today I'm the senior pastor of the Nazarene Congregational United Church of Christ, as you know.
Congratulations.
Well, thank you.
Yes,
as
congratulations,
you know, the United Church of Christ is a very progressive denomination. But I actually, let me just say, very important that it was at the Abyssinian Baptist Church.
Mr. Butts.
With Dr. Calvin Butts, who had always been a colleague in the ministry. But he was a very, very instrumental man in my life in that when I decided to come home to the church, he provided a wonderful opportunity for me to come home. Abyssinian is a great church, great history.
It's a great
justice,
institution,
the social gospel. And the members and the deacons of that church embraced me, and it was there that I was baptized again. It was there that I preached my trial sermon.
How'd it go?
It went great. And it was there that I was ordained as a Baptist
Were you nervous?
preacher.
Were you nervous when you did that? Did you have the willies, or were you?
I was humble.
How did you do it? You were humble.
I was
humble. That's good. Yeah.
And it was there that Dr. Butts.
You were really humble. You weren't faking.
Really, very humble.
You weren't faking humble.
And from that point, I went up to Boston to pastor a UCC church in Roxbury, and in the last 4 years I've been back in Brooklyn. I ended up finishing my seminary training at Union Theological Seminary, where I got a chance to study under Professor James Cone, Dr. James Cone, liberation theology.
You're getting serious on this theology stuff.
Well,
and you're going to be going to Princeton, I think?
I'm doing some additional work at Princeton
They
Theological
just can't keep
Seminary.
you down, can you? You're learning all the time. There's a lot to learn, right?
You're always learning in life.
There's a lot to learn.
We're always students in life.
One quick thing, and then we want to get to some politics. We only got a few minutes and everything, but you say the Abrahamic thing, Judeo-Christian and Islam and that, but you could sit down and break bread with a Hindu.
Absolutely.
Or a Buddhist.
Absolutely.
Or a Tao or something.
So
you see, that's beyond the, you know what I'm saying. So it's an ecumenical world that we live in.
Ecumenical and interfaith world. Ecumenism speaks to the various denominations of Christianity.
Right.
But we can't stop there.
Yeah.
We've got to be interfaith as well.
So, and we could go on. Why don't we talk a little? Thank you for that. Really interesting.
Let me just say this. Because,
say whatever.
While I've been at Nazarene for about 4 years now, a year ago I was called as the senior pastor, and we're having a tremendous event on the weekend of October 18th, and I want all of your viewers to know about it. And we're located at 506 McDonough Street in Brooklyn. That's in Bedford-Stuyvesant.
What's the subway stop?
A train to Utica Avenue.
A train to Utica. Take the A train.
We're 137 years old. And,
just getting started, huh?
Well, yeah. Great historical church. In fact, one of the ministers there donated his personal books to Howard University, and that started the Moreland Spingarn Library at Howard.
Right.
But when most churches have an installation, or many of them, they have a gospel celebration and a dinner.
Right.
What we've decided to do is have a social justice conference. And
you still got that social gospel going.
Yes,
right?
and that will take place on Saturday, October 17th, and then my installation service will be Sunday, October 18th. But for those that would like information, I want them to go to the website, because we're going to have a lot of national speakers, national leaders, clergy, scholars, media personalities.
It's going to be like a symposium or something?
It will be a one-day social justice.
Is that going to be open to the public or no?
It will be open to the public.
You're going to let me know about it?
I will.
I would like to be there.
Well, and also they can.
You think I should be there? It's going to be a good place to be.
You should be there.
Should I be there?
Our theme, Brother Channer, is doing God's work in the Kings County.
Okay. But you're in Kings County.
Establishing the kingdom of God on earth as it is in heaven.
Okay.
So that's going to be a great day. And we hope that all of those that would like to participate would go to the website and join us on Sunday, October the 18th, as well as October the 17th.
17th, 18th. A train to Utica.
Utica Avenue.
And the church.
And go to the website.
Why don't you give us the website now? We're going to put it up at the end.
ConradTillard.com.
Conrad Tillard, ConradTillard.com.
That's correct.
Do you mind we're saying that? I hope you don't mind.
That's fine.
You can go there, and is there information about that thing?
Now.
Is there a link there on about the 17th and 18th?
Yes.
Okay, well, that's well said. Now, why don't we talk? We got about just a few minutes. UN is here now.
Yes.
And we're talking, Mr. Obama addressed us. They got a meeting in Pittsburgh today talking about the economic situation. And you wanted to have some thought about the current situation. What is your feeling now as we're this long into the administration of Mr. Obama in terms of current political affairs, national and world?
Well, I mean, my view is that, first of all, he's only been president for a couple of months now. And although it seems like it's a long time, it's about 5 or 6 months. So
5 or 6 is different than 2.
Right.
Well, usually they get the ground running that first 30 days.
Still early in his presidency.
Of course. But we get some directions.
But of course, he inherited the helm of the country at a very difficult time. I mean, essentially, there was a lot of unfinished business that the Bush administration left him with. The economy was tanking as he was coming in. And the Republicans, the right wing, decided the day that he came in that they were going to be not only an opposition party, but an obstructionist party. But I think the greatest problem that the president has is not the Republicans, because that's a shrinking party. They are becoming a regional party.
Well, remember, they thought that of the Democratic Party a few times, and then they come back from like a vampire returns or something.
And I think there's a real opportunity for the Republicans to come back. But I think the biggest problem the president has is not the Republican Party. His problem are the marginal Republicans who are in the Democratic Party.
The Blue Dogs or something? Or?
The Blue Dogs,
no.
the DLC.
DLC, you count that. You count the DSAW with the Blue Dogs?
The Democrats who haven't decided yet that they want to be Democrats and support his mandate.
You see,
and I think that's his biggest problem. If you have a majority in the Congress,
right.
you have a comprehensive agenda, pass the agenda. The problem is the Democratic Party is divided, and I think that the president is going to have to show tremendous leadership. He's a reconciler. He wants to
I think so. I think that's
in a post sort of partisan way.
But
I don't know that that's possible.
Well, all right.
Chandler.
Now
I don't know that that's possible.
But that's like that's like being ecumenical. We're not going to leave anybody out. We're going to get in touch with everybody. And that's that. You understand you understand what I'm saying, right? The comparison.
I understand the idea.
And that's idealistic, and it's admirable at a certain level. Let's involve everybody in this tent.
But when the big tent, Lyndon Johnson said it's better to have everyone in the tent pissing out rather than out of the tent pissing in.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
And of course, it's good. He ran on a campaign of post-partisanship. But when you have Republicans who, the day he was elected, decided in lockstep that they would obstruct everything that he attempts to do, at some point, he has to become more assertive and go ahead and pass an agenda that will show the American people that his ideas, the direction he wants the country to go in, is beneficial to them. If he continues to be bogged down with people who will never support him anyway, he won't even get the accomplishments to demonstrate to people how his agenda will have a positive effect on his life. And then midterm elections are coming up. 4 years is right around the corner. Then the Republicans will be able to say he didn't accomplish a thing.
Well, they would.
So he's got to accomplish some things. And I think the only way he's going to do that is to whip the Democratic Party into line. They talk about.
Well, he whipped them into line enough to get elected president of the United States against all odds, not a small matter.
Rahm Emanuel.
Rahm Emanuel.
Rambo. His team is going to have to become extremely assertive and say to the Democratic caucus, look, I've got an agenda and we're going to pass this agenda. And then once he passes this ambitious health care
well, I was going to say,
proposal,
everything is going.
And the individual American people see that there are benefits in terms of their own personal situation, then the empty rhetoric of Sean Hannity and Rush Limbaugh and Glenn Beck will not be as effective or influential as it is in the average person that's under their voices now. The reality is, Brother Chandler, these are multimillionaires who are talking populism and playing the race card and dividing working class people.
Well, the race card's worked long over a long history.
They have continued to work. And it never ceases to amaze me how a white person sitting in a trailer park in Illinois
with no water,
with no health care, no heat, can find Rush Limbaugh more attractive and find more common ground with Rush Limbaugh than they can with Barack Obama, who himself grew up among working class whites of a mixed race background, whose mother ultimately succumbed and had a horrible time with the insurance companies, as many of these people are having a horrible time with their insurance companies.
Well, the great Mencken once said, nobody ever went broke underestimating the intelligence of the American people. There's a degree of that. There's a great deal of just plain old stupidity and a sense of anger. Of chagrin about somebody getting something done. There's envy.
Anger's being exploited.
And they've had the political rug pulled out from under them. There's a lot of upset. That can be dangerous. But there are other things. There's the thing about Abu Ghraib. There's the thing about Guantanamo. There's the thing about, there's all kinds of things that come up. He seems to have done it not wanting to bring any of these things up because it would take all the oxygen out of the room of the big thing, which is the health care proposal that he's proposed. And he has been trying to do bipartisan outreach if he possibly can. and so forth. How far do you go toward that to where you are not having an effective thing? Will there be a public sector component to it as it begins to be brought into being, or will that have to be thrown overboard in order to get the bipartisan support of the Republican or that side of the political equation? That's the big issue before us right now. What do you think?
And I think if I were in his shoes,
would you push it?
I would. Number one, I think correctly want all of the attention of my administration focused on getting the health care bill done.
Right, you got to make sure he has to be sure.
That's the most important thing.
He has to get that bill done. They're banking on him not doing it, and then like the Clintons, just lifting them on that petard and saying they're no good, so they could come back into power and overthrow him. It's a way to overthrow him.
It will be a defining issue of his presidency.
Could the Democrats do it?
Unfortunately, yes, the Democrats could do it.
They could do it alone without the Republican Party. Just leave them aside for a while, the Whigs or something, or some sort of. You think he's going to get to that?
Because I think as long as he does everything in his power to be inclusive, to be post-partisan.
He's done that.
He has.
And it's hard to be inclusive because you're including somebody that somebody else is targeting in their thinking. And so when you bring everybody in, that's hard for the people who hate the person you're going to bring in. And the need for ecumenicism applies to the political process as well as it does to just general social organization.
I think that's why his focus, you'll see his focus.
And I commend him for that ecumenical impetus or something, to the degree that he has that, and that's to be lauded.
I would just call it bipartisanship, because some of those guys.
Well, I'm trying to reach out toward a larger thing because it involves the world. It involves the world. We have a world. They have a lot of people who get a great deal of energy going by scapegoat, and they used to scapegoat the communists. Remember, they had the communists to kick around.
Right.
And now it's the Islam.
Right.
So a lot of people get off on doing that. So now if we're going to have to work something out with the 2 billion people who are of the Islamic faith. Yeah. And so that's something a lot of people don't want to hear because that's the enemy du jour. Right. Do you understand what I'm saying? So to get out of that dialectic, that's a larger world responsibility that we have, and he tries to carry that high road and that idealistic high road, and I commend him for trying. It's hard.
His message to the UN spoke to that. But of course, you always have that right wing whenever he tries this broad approach, saying he's caving in, he's apologizing for America. But I think that.
You understand what I'm saying?
I absolutely do.
It's a higher calling.
But I think the president has to really be focused on what his agenda is. I think the Democrats have got to come together. Yeah. Because all of their political lives are in jeopardy if they don't get something done.
Well, they've got to get that bill. They got to get the health thing. They got to get something done there, and he's doing it that way. And it's a very crucial time and so forth. And
I think he'll get it done. Now, what it looks like, I think, is up for debate. But I think that history will record that President Obama radically transformed America with respect to average citizens and people in this country being able to get health care. Obviously, we're the richest nation on the earth.
It's absurd that we don't have it.